It's been a decade since a single powerful promise set the UK on a completely new course, Brexit. But now, a huge new poll's out, and it suggests the reality has been, well, very different from the dream. So today, we're going to dig into what was promised, what the numbers are telling us now, and the massive choice the UK is facing once again.
And it all started with these three little words: take back control. This wasn't just some catchy phrase on the side of a bus. It was the engine of a political earthquake, the promise that fueled an entire movement.
So take back control was the core of it all, right? Figures like Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage championed this vision of a truly sovereign future, a Britain free from Brussels, making its own laws and steering its own ship. That was the picture that was painted.
Okay, so let's fast forward to today. A massive poll of 20,000 people has just dropped, and it gives us a real reality check. And what it shows is that for most Britons, the reality of Brexit has fallen way, way short of that original promise. Which brings us right to the heart of the matter, the one question this whole debate hinges on, and the question this poll really tried to answer. Did the UK actually take back control? Well, according to the public, the answer is a huge, resounding no. And this number, it's just staggering. Instead of taking back control, 72% of voters now feel the UK has less control than before. Only about 15% think the promise was kept. It's a total flip of the central argument for leaving in the first place. And that feeling of losing control, it hits right where it hurts: the economy. A full two-thirds of Britons, that's 66%, are convinced that leaving the EU has actively damaged the nation's finances. And I mean, just look at this chart. It lays it out so clearly. The gap is absolutely enormous. You've got 66% seeing a negative hit, while only 22%, barely 1 in 5, think it's been a good thing. That is about as clear a verdict as you're ever going to get from the public on the economy. Remember the phrase Project Fear? Back during the referendum, that's what supporters of leaving called all the dire warnings from the Remain side. Well, it looks like the tables have turned. A solid majority, 55%, now say, you know what? Those warnings actually came true. But here's the thing. This unhappiness with Brexit, it isn't happening in a bubble. The poll shows it's actually part of a much bigger, much deeper sense of pessimism that seems to have really taken hold across the country. And this pessimism, it runs deep. I mean, these numbers are truly grim. Two-thirds of people think the country's best days are gone. Nearly three-quarters say the UK is on the wrong track. And maybe the most heartbreaking of all, 77% don't think life will be better for their kids. That bleak outlook actually makes Britain the most pessimistic major nation surveyed. And when an entire country feels this down, it starts to have other effects. It's actually eroding faith in democracy itself. According to the poll, the UK now has the highest percentage of people who feel that voting makes absolutely no difference in their lives. And if you break it down by generation, you see a really concerning split. The poll found that 18% of young Britons, Gen Z, would actually prefer a strongman leader who doesn't have to bother with elections. As you can see, that is more than double the rate for baby boomers. Okay, so with all of this public dissatisfaction and the ongoing economic friction, the new government under Prime Minister Keir Starmer is stepping in with a proposed solution. They're dubbing it a Brexit reset. So the main part of this plan revolves around a concept called dynamic alignment. Sounds a bit technical, right? But basically what it means is that instead of the UK creating its own separate rules for everything, it would choose to follow the EU's rulebook in certain areas, like food and animal welfare. When the EU updates a rule, the UK would just adopt the same one. So how would this actually play out? Well, imagine the EU passes a new law on food standards. Step 2, UK ministers could then use new powers to make that same law apply in Britain. And the whole point of this is Step 3, to make it way easier for British companies to sell their products in Europe by cutting down on all that extra paperwork and trade friction. But of course, it's not that simple. This plan immediately sparks a huge, fundamental debate that takes us right back to square one of the Brexit argument. It's a classic trade-off between economic pragmatism on one side and national sovereignty on the other. The opposition's take is pretty blunt. They're calling this a surrender of our freedom. Their argument is that if you do this, the UK ends up having to follow EU laws without getting any say or vote in how they're made, which, they point out, is the very thing Brexit was supposed to stop. On the flip side, the government's argument is just as straightforward. A source from the Labour Party basically says, look, any international deal you ever make involves sharing some rules. That's just how they work. So for them, it's not about losing sovereignty. It's just a practical choice for the good of the economy. And this table just lays out how divided the political scene is on this. You've got the Labour government pushing this for the economic upside. Then you have the Conservatives and Reform UK, who are completely against it, saying it sacrifices sovereignty. And then there are the Liberal Democrats, who say it doesn't even go far enough. They want to rejoin a customs union.
So what this all means is that Britain is once again at a huge crossroads in its relationship with Europe. It's stuck between the cold, hard economic reality of trade and that very powerful, very ideological promise that started this whole journey.
So let's just boil it down. The public largely feels that Brexit hasn't delivered, especially on the economy. But the government's potential fix, while it might help businesses, seems to go against the whole idea of taking back control. So now the UK has to make this really tough choice between what's practical for the economy and what's pure to the original Brexit idea.
And that leaves us with the one final critical question that is hanging over this entire debate, a question the entire country is now going to have to answer as it figures out its future. What is the true price of control?